I'm a healer, but written by Yellow Leader on AO3 and read by Hero Stories. Chapter 23. Warning. This chapter details mental and physical child abuse, as well as light suggestions of suicidal tendencies. This goes for the whole chapter. Summary will be at the end. Theseus was 8 when he got his powers. A farmer at the edge of L'Manberg was a foster parent, and he always had a few kids staying with him. They helped him with the farm, never more than they could handle, and in exchange they could stay as long as they didn't cause any trouble. Theseus had always been a troublemaker. He made loud, weird noises when he was happy or sad, and jumped off high places and stole things he wanted. But he tried so hard to be good for the farmer, because when he was good, he was allowed to take care of the cows. Henry had been his favorite. Her name was actually Betsy or something stupid like that, but Theseus had secretly renamed her Henry. His only friend, another one of the Fosters, told him it was dumb, but he always called her Henry too, so he couldn't have thought it was too dumb. But then Henry got sick. She wasn't walking around much, so she couldn't make it to the grass. And Theseus had to start hand feeding her fruits to make sure she was eating enough. She stopped producing milk, and he'd overheard the farmer talk about sending her away. And and Theseus panicked. People usually get their powers when they're at least teenagers. Healers are usually the only outliers. For some reason, they almost always come in younger. Nowadays, he thinks that it's because only a kid can have a truly selfless urge to help others, because he would have done anything to help Henry. So he snuck out in the middle of the night, breaking into the barn, curling up next to her. He just wanted to spend whatever time he could with her before the farmer sent her away to who knows where. But then he had rested a hand on his side and he fixed her. He didn't know how. His power was still too weak for him to even recognize what he was healing. But when he dropped his hand, exhausted, she was all better. And she let him know it too, mooing up a storm enough to wake the whole barn and the farmer too. The farmer had stormed into the shed assuming there was an intruder, but instead found Theseus clutching a bouquet of buttercups while he cried tears of joy. It was only a day later that a hero came to talk to him. The number one hero of the time, the captain. He always thought she was so cool. He treated him like a grown-up as she sat down to talk to him. No baby talk, like a social worker. No exploration, like his teachers. She told him that he had a very powerful gift, that healers were rare, and healers who could heal animals or sickness were even rarer. She looked a little sad when she told him she'd like him to come with her, because he could be a hero like her, saving people who are hurt or protecting other heroes. But Theseus didn't want to go. He didn't even want to heal people, which made the captain look confused when he told her he wanted to stay with Henry and his friend. And the social worker tried to insist, tried to grab his hand and pull him into the captain's car. He bit her and ran up to the room he shared with his friend, shutting himself in the closet and refusing to come out till his friend promised they were gone. The farmer tried to bring it up a few more times, but Theseus ignored him, started taking care of the cows, whether the farmer said he could or not. It wasn't long before he got a new social worker, his old one refusing to return after she had to go to the hospital to stitch up his bite. The day he met his new social worker, Miss Puffy, she introduced him to Clay. Clay was always so nice. He was only 18, normally too young to adopt, but he was a special case, Miss Puffy told him. Theseus felt more comfortable around him than he did any of the few adults who had tried to speak to him in the past. So he nodded shyly and went out for a walk to get to know Clay. Clay was so cool. He listened to Theseus when he talked about school or the farm, or his thoughts on which color M&M tasted the best. And in exchange, he talked about his best friend and his school apartment and how he thought Theseus was a nice kid. Theseus liked him. He started coming by all the time, and Theseus' friend got jealous, but Theseus didn't care because Clay liked him too. He liked him enough to talk about adopting him, not as a son, but as his little brother. Theseus loved farming and he loved sharing a room with his friend, but Clay was the first adult that ever liked him, even though he was high energy and annoying. Eventually, he agreed, and Miss Buffy gave him a sad smile that was almost familiar when he told her. When the papers were all signed, Theseus' friend cried and clung to him, and Theseus wasn't clingy, but he hugged him back just as tight, promised him that he would come back to visit. Clay said he could come by at least once a week to see him, if not more. His friend, still crying, pushed two big discs into his hand. They were the only thing he had from his father, but he insisted that Theseus take them, so they could give them back and forth whenever they visited each other. Then Clay took Theseus home, but his apartment wasn't in an apartment building. It was in the Hero Organization headquarters. Theseus had been confused, and then a little afraid. But Clay was so nice and gentle when he explained that he was a hero, that he was allowed to tell Theseus until he was adopted, but that it was all okay because it was the safest place in the world. And Theseus needed to be safe, so he couldn't go back to the farm for a little while. He said that Theseus would never have to want for anything because Clay was rich, even though he was still just a brand new hero. He said he'd be safe, he'd be happy. He just had to not cause any trouble for any other heroes he met while he was here. But he had to start going by a new name. Clay picked it out for him, Theo. He told Theseus that he had a very cool name, but that there were villains out there who could do evil magic if they knew his name, so Theseus couldn't let anyone know what it was. Even if it was safe here, it was only safe if he kept his name a secret. And he trusted Clay, so he loves Theo. Theo liked to watch TV. There wasn't one at the farm, and his foster homes before there usually didn't let him use it because they didn't like him, or because their real kids wanted to use it, or because he was bad. But Clay was out a lot between training and patrolling, so Theo could sit on the couch and watch cartoons or whatever else he wanted. He was watching the news the first time Clay got really hurt. Before then, it had only ever been scratches. Clay would come home, an odd look in his eye as he showed off a cut or scrape, but that was all. But he'd been stabbed badly, and the captain came to get him because he was Clay's little brother. But really, it was because he was a healer. He was brought into the headquarters hospital wing, and there had been so much blood. Theo watched it drip onto the floor as the captain cried, pleading for him to help her duckling. And he kept his eyes on the puddle as he reached out, putting a hand on Clay's arm. He wasn't allowed to keep the puppies. He wasn't allowed to stay either. Sent back to Clay's apartment in the building to sit alone while Clay talked to the other heroes. He crawled up on the couch, suddenly so tired, and fell asleep. Clay had woken him up with a hug, putting him into his arms and telling him he couldn't have a better little brother. Theo just hummed as Clay praised him, a distant part of him happy to be wanted. He felt so numb after seeing his older brother bleeding out. From then on, Clay would gently prod him into healing even those little scrapes he got during training. It was like Theo was getting training of his own, he said, because soon he wouldn't get so tired when he had to heal. He brought over one of his friends too, his best friend Goggy, a hero just like him. Clay liked Goggy a lot, so when Goggy hurt himself during fights, he'd ask Theo if he could patch him up too, and he would, because his brother wanted him to. He was tired a lot. But Clay was right, he was always right. Eventually he got less and less tired. By his 10th birthday, he took multiple broken bones before he'd fall asleep mid-healing. Clay was hurt more and more often, but he told Theo it was okay. He was just fighting stronger villains and being a little less careful. Because sometimes being careful meant that innocent civilians could get hurt, and they didn't have a healer like Clay did. So every day Theo sat on the couch and watched the news. Sometimes Miss Puffy would come by and try to teach him like he was still in school. But it was hard to focus when he knew Clay was out fighting monsters. She understood though, and she told him that she was so sorry that he had to work so hard all the time. She told him she wished she could have sent him somewhere else. And he cried. And she cried with him. When he told Clay what she said, she didn't come back. And Theo had to start learning from videos and worksheets instead. He was 12 when he realized he didn't remember the last time Clay called him his brother. Clay was 22 and he was starting to get upset a lot. But he was still always right. Theo was a bad healer, but a bad kid. He was too hyper from being inside all the time and he made too many noises for no reason. And he always got into Clay's things because he was so bored all the time. He was always in trouble, except when he was healing Clay, or Goggy, or Clay's new friend Sapnap. If he was healing, he was good. If he wasn't, he was bad. But he wasn't healing enough, because he was too glad for Clay to call him his brother. He didn't remember the last time Clay said it, but he did remember when it changed. When Clay called him his best friend instead. Theo was his best friend, he promised. Goggy was a different kind of friend, but Theo was best. Even when he was bad. Theo felt like he had been slapped, but Clay hadn't slapped him. Not that day. He'd been good. Been so good as he sealed together the holes in Bobby's stomach, ripped through by the warden's trident. But Clay still didn't calm his brother. He was stand to walk back to the apartment alone. Clay was staying back to sit with Goggy even though he was fully recovered. And Theo had crawled onto the couch and cried as quietly as he could. He tried to remember what it was like to be praised when he did a good job. At 14, Dream found that fucking book. He'd come home with it one day and told Theo that if he touched it, he'd be in more trouble than he'd ever been in his life. Dream was barely home before then. Thank Theo, he had to be more self-sufficient, so Sapnap didn't have to babysit him all the time. But also get him mad when he cooked himself something that Dream wanted to eat, or when he did laundry a little wrong because he had to teach himself how to do it, or when the couch looked gross because Theo had slept on it for days and he didn't have energy to shower, let alone clean up. But now he had that book. Dream was home more often. Theo had to be quiet and stay in his room so he wouldn't get in Dream's way. But he also had to be out of his room whenever Dream wanted him, so Dream didn't have to go out of his way to get him. He was so tired, even though healing never tired him out anymore. He'd grown powerful enough that sometimes he wondered if he could heal someone who was dead. Sometimes he wondered what would happen if he died. He thought about death a little too much for a 14-year-old. Maybe. But Dream was so excited over the book. So, if Theo wasn't allowed to touch it, at least Dream was in a better mood as he talked about it, about what it said, what it could do. It was that evil magic he'd wanted Theo about so much when he was little. But Dream loved the book anyway. Theo thought about death a lot. It had weird It was weird timing that a book about death showed up just about then. He wasn't allowed to touch it. But he was so curious. And he was left alone because all three of them were supposed to be out on patrol. So he picked up the book off the kitchen table ever so carefully and opened it up. Just as Dream opened his front door, Goggy and Sapnap were right behind him. His arm was twisted, forcing him to drop it. But Dream just kept twisting and it cracked once and then again, and he screamed because Dream had hit him. Dream hit him all the time, but this was different. Goggy laughed awkwardly, telling Dream he went overboard, and Theo's eyes were watering, but then he met Sapnap's anyway, and Sapnap was mean. He made fun of Theo all the time for being too tired to shower or for being too loud when he said something dumb because his mouth moved faster than his brain. But for as mean as Sapnap was, he still looked horrified, like something was wrong. Maybe this was wrong. Theo slept through his 15th birthday. He slept through being most of being 15. Goggy didn't like watching him. When he was 16, he was allowed to be awake more often. Dream claiming he should be more mature even though it felt like no time passed at all to him. He was though. He sat on the couch and healed whenever he was told to. He still felt any weird sounds. he wanted to make, because making sounds was bring attention to himself, and bring attention just made him go back to sleep. He never wanted to sleep again. Sepnap was allowed to keep an eye on him again, at least, and it's been one of those nights when he just broke. Theo didn't know what caused it. He was just so tired, but he was so afraid to go to sleep. And Sepnap said his name, but it wasn't his name, and he just collapsed, sobbing. Sepnap was so awkward about it as he patted his back, but it was the first time someone had touched him without hurting him in so long. The only time someone reached out to him instead of being forced to reach out to them to heal. He stuttered through trying to cheer him up, telling him if he hated the name Theo so much, maybe he could pick a new one. He didn't always have to stick to the same thing forever. He had options. He had options. He'd never thought about options before. He spent half his life with a dream. He didn't get to make choices. He didn't get to think about other options. But there were other people out there who needed healers, didn't they? There were other places besides the Hero Organization's headquarters. There were options. There was the Syndicate, the worst villains in existence, monsters that had almost killed Dream and Gogi and Sapnap a dozen times over. No one would look for him there. No one would get him there. Even monsters were better than staying with Dream. He chose the name Tommy that night, and Sapnap nodded and kept patting his back. He didn't realize what he'd set in motion. It wasn't hard to leave. Tommy never tried before, so no one bothered to stop him. People in the elevator assumed he was going somewhere for a dream. The people by the exit had never seen him before. He walked outside, and he felt like a starved flower finally seeing the sun. He'd stolen from Dream before he left. A quick fuck you to echo the louder fuck you of leaving. Sunglasses to cover his glowing eyes. Gloves a little too big to hide flowers in when he healed himself. And praying. He was healing himself. No one was stopping him. And he had the book. The stupid fucked up valuable book from the library of Jay Slatt. Tommy watched the news. He'd seen both Jay Slatt's criminal trial and the divorce one. He knew that Ace was his ex-husband, that he'd probably trade anything for a chance to one-up his ex. And so Tommy hitchhiked his way to the Las Nevadas. Ace was nice. Not sweet, soft niceness that Tommy had nightmares about, but a genuine way where he was only so nice. At the end of the day, he was a businessman, and Tommy was his temporary partner. So Ace had to treat him well. It gave him a new appreciation for business relationships. As grateful as he was for the book, Ace was hesitant to introduce him to the syndicate. At least until Tommy offered to prove it. Ace had paused for a moment before asking what Tommy could really heal. He doubted all the way that Tommy had bragged. Fair, but they were all true. So when Ace asked him if he could fix brain trauma, he shrugged and said he could give it a shot. Ace brought him to the cells, hidden deep beneath the beauty of Las Nevadas, and Tommy walked straight in, only to find a familiar face. The Orchronos. They'd never spoken, but He saw him on the news often enough, and he'd passed in the hospital wing more than once. He'd heard bits and pieces of doctors talking about his brain, that he had serious memory problems, but no one had ever asked him to try healing it. Kronos didn't recognize him, but he was furious to see Ace bring in a child. He yelled and snarled at Ace, and Tommy ignored how Ace's hands shook as he gently pushed Tommy forward towards the screaming hero. Tommy's heart was pounding when he put a hand on top of his head, but he immediately felt what was wrong. The parts of his brain that were damaged, and Tommy fixed it. It was an immediate change. Kronos, Carl, almost went limp before looking at Ace and calling him Quackity. He apologized over and over, and Ace broke into sobs as he set Carl free and clung to him. Tommy stepped into the hall to give them privacy, holding a bundle of daisies. A man made of slime taught him how to turn them into a flower crown while he waited. He was exhausted when Quackity stepped out of the room, Carl on his arm, and he gently set Carl away before leading Tommy to the most luxurious room he'd ever seen. Tommy was a valuable asset, he realized. So valuable that Quackity gave him food he never could have dreamed of eating. So valuable he could just ask for something and he'd have it in his hand within an hour. So valuable that Quackity thought it was a shame when he decided to go. Charlie gave him a ride to the edge of the woods the syndicate lived in, and Tommy very slowly made his way to the house. There were a bunch of strange traps on the way, but not so fatal he couldn't heal them before he bled out. So even when it hurt like hell, he kept trudging forward, because he had to see this through. He had to meet his monsters. Except they weren't monsters. Sure, they looked it at first, even without the mask. The blade looked like a monster, huge and bulking, more piggling than human. But he also had long, pretty pink hair that he could clearly take good care of. The Angel of Death could torture someone to death with a touch. But he also had beautiful wings that Tommy wanted nothing more than to touch. Plus, the Angel read manga, and the Blade was a mythology nerd, not that intimidating. Tommy pushed a lot when he met them, never too far. He knew what Dream's limits truly were, but years trying to read him made him good at reading other people. When Phil's sighs turned from amused to annoyed, he knew to shut the fuck up. When Blade got a little too fidgety at Tommy's chattering, he knew to shut the fuck up. But they never actually lashed out. They didn't know how valuable he was, but they still treated him like a real business partner, like they had some sort of respect for him. Even Blade made sure he was eating. It was incredible. He actually made a good choice coming here. And then he met Wilbur. Dream had made Tommy look into the syndicate a few times. There hadn't been much to look at, but when he found Wilbur Suit's trail, Dream had been so angry. Even though it took so much digging to find it, he still felt like Tommy should have known that his finils were by a supervillain. He didn't really care because the music was so incredible, and now he was supposed to work with it, so what did it matter? Anyway, and Wilbur liked him. At least he said he did. He said he wanted to keep him, which already said alarm bells in his brain. But it was so much worse when he joked about Tommy being his brother. He liked the syndicate, but if Wilbur said that again, he was going to kill them all, even if he died in the progress. Blade and Phil were good, but Wilbur, the guy he admired, was already treating him like a thing before he even revealed he wasn't the healer. He even went through Tommy's things, which he had to write, and Tommy was so terrified when he found Wilbur holding the stuffed animal he stole from the arcade in Lost and Fathers, the one he named Henry. But Wilbur just gave it back. Dream would never just give something back. Dream was on TV that night, begging for him to come home. He wanted to listen, he wanted to die rather than to go back. He wanted to pretend that Dream actually wanted him, instead of just wanting his powers. Or probably just that fucking book. When the syndicate used him as bait, dangling him in front of Dream like a worm, Tommy almost cracked. Because Dream was being nice. He was worried about Tommy. God, I thought you were stolen, Theo. Oh, right. Tommy's just an asset. It was even more obvious when Dream threatened to kill him. Then he knew. Then he threw Tommy in front of him like he was a human shield. Dream didn't give a shit about him. He never did. He didn't need a brother. He just needed Dream dead. Blade gave that to him, and Tommy healed Wilbur in return. His heart was pounding the whole trip home. Not because Dream was dead, though he was. Tommy watched his head roll away from the body, but because they knew. They knew he was a healer, and he belonged to them. They wouldn't have to play nice with him because he was a business partner anymore. So, what would change? To the Blade, very little. He made it clear that Tommy wasn't family to them, and Tommy was so relieved. He wasn't an object, he wasn't a best friend, he was just an employee. And then he was pulled into their nest. Tommy had been hesitant, but Blade had gestured for him to join, and he reluctantly sat down next to Wilbur. He felt weirdly conflicted. On one reasonable hand, he was just sitting in a pile of blankets with a bunch of supervillains that had just killed Dream. On the other unreasonable hand, he felt cozy and safe and cuddled up in the nest. It was almost embarrassing how much he enjoyed it, and how quickly that sense of safety made him drop off to sleep. When he woke up in Wilbur's arms, he swore he wouldn't do that again. It was too weird. He didn't like feeling so unwillingly secure, whatever that meant. When he woke up there again, after being basically mind controlled, he just wanted to fucking die. Wilbur's powers felt so nauseatingly familiar. He couldn't even be nauseous because he was forced to eat. Just be quiet and calm. Just like he'd been forced to be quiet and asleep for so long. Well, he wasn't going to be quiet anymore. He'd fucking scream and fight and wither any motherfucking stupid enough to try to use their powers on him. But Wilbur left him alone. Phil kept trying to get him back to the nest without his flower crown, but when he refused, Phil let him be. The Blade was the best among the team, the best among them, because he was straightforward. He was honest. He wouldn't pretend that Tommy wasn't special to him. He wouldn't try to manipulate him into being the door of the healer. Tommy could trust him. All the more so when Techno really started taking him seriously. when he let Tommy join him into torturing Goggy, and then more traitors to the syndicate, thieves that stole from them, rival gangs who hurt their people. Tommy let him do whatever he wanted, and it was so freeing in the weirdest way, because hurting people probably shouldn't be like that. It shouldn't be fun, probably, to tell the monster how to hurt how to hurt someone just to patch them up and do it again. But it was. It actually calmed him down, genuinely, enough that he was finally willing to hit a dickhead out. He wasn't sure what he expected. Manipulative apology, he got that. Explanation of his powers, he didn't expect that one, but got it anyway. And God, how embarrassing to know Wilbur could always see how scared he is. How relieving to know that Wilbur only gave a shit because he couldn't really help but feel what Tommy felt. It wasn't deliberate manipulation, it was just him wanting Tommy to stop. Tommy wished he could stop too, but his feelings really didn't ask him before they happened. He didn't really expect a tragic backstory either, but it was. He understood, kind of, why Will was so fucked up. Tommy always dreamed of flying. The fact that Wilbur gave it up for someone only for them to die right away was so fucked up. Tommy would probably become mass murderer too. On the whole dead mom thing. The whole thing gave him an idea. An idea he was working so hard on. That he almost passed out for multiple times when he was walking with Techno. That he was going to try on the holiday, but he had chickened out. He was scared of it going wrong, so he gave Wilbur a shitty backup gift. Some bookmarks he made of the flowers he had from healing Wilbur. Somehow Wilbur still liked it, which was dumb. Didn't even know what he was missing out on. Tommy had been nervous about giving gifts at all. He didn't know them well. They didn't know him either, but it was nice to get gifts for the holidays for the literal first time in his life. Not that he told them that. It was still awkward as he passed out his own, but Wilbur almost cried off the bookmarks. Funny wouldn't let go of the plushie. Phil immediately took advantage of the perfect nesting material Tommy took ages picking out. And Techno fucking lost his shit over the crown. The shine of the diamonds caught Tommy's eyes the moment he saw them, and he wanted so badly to take it for himself. The crown was so shiny, so pretty. He'd never wanted anything more in his life than he wanted that fucking crown. But the dream had mostly beaten the sticky fingers out of him, and he was gift shopping. So he tried to pull himself away from it, but Wilbur said Techno liked jewelry. He had a different crown that was part of his costume. Maybe he'd like it too. Maybe it'd be a great gift. And Techno would pat his head or something, and then he didn't know what, but he wanted to get him something good, and there was nothing better than this. Techno agreed. He put it straight into his hoard, something Tommy didn't understand logically, but completely understood on a personal level. Hybrid instincts forcing you to have a collection of items while you kill someone if they take it from you? Weird. If anyone takes any of Tommy's collection of beloved items, he would kill them and use Dream's stupid book to bring them back and do it again. And then he came back with a new shiny relic, a bracelet, one made of gold and emeralds. Not something you can find in any store since it's been a symbol of the syndicate for decades at least. It had to be specially ordered or something, but Techno gave it to him anyway, and it was suddenly the most important thing Tommy currently owned, even more important than his plush Henry. And then he got a cow that looked just like the original Henry on top of that. Nothing could ever be better than that day, and nothing could ever be worse. Because after a horrible nightmare, Trim breaking his bones one by one and reminding that Tommy didn't deserve the syndicate's kindness, that he didn't deserve jewelry or trinkets on the nest or anything. He didn't deserve food or water. He didn't deserve to be. He woke up. He went to get water, and he got lied to. They say they like him. They say they care about him. They want him to live forever, just stay with them. It's the biggest bullshit he's ever heard. But then Techno lied straight to his face. He just wanted to scream and run and curl up into a ball all at once. But everyone's so freaked out, and he's so freaked out, and Phil chirps, and he chirps back. It's just one of the stupid noises he made when he was a kid. It didn't mean anything back then. It was just weird, like how his friend headbutted everything with his horns, or how one of the older foster girls they lived with always hummed while she tended the farmer's plants. It was a habit, or just a weird trait, but it didn't mean anything, and he made himself stop when everyone around him got annoyed with it. But everyone's looking at him like he did something wrong, and he did. He was supposed to stop doing things like that, and it's probably fucked up to chirp at an avian anyway. It's probably a hate crime or something, and they hate him. They really do, because otherwise they wouldn't lie to him, and and now they can't hide it because he's fucked up. He doesn't even realize when he starts running. Yo, I've got 10 subscribers. Um, that's kind of a milestone. So I would do a special one shot or something to celebrate the occasion, but I don't have one I really want to do. So if you guys have any suggestions, leave them in the comment section and maybe I'll do them. But yeah, I've got 10 subscribers. Yay. The summary. Tommy is an orphan, discovers his powers by healing a cow, Henry, later gets adopted by Dream, who just started as a hero. Tommy refuses to heal Dream's minor injuries. One day Dream gets a major injury, Tommy heals it. From then on, Dream coaxes him into healing more minor injuries for both himself, George, and Sapnap. Then Dream gets the book, is home more often. One day Tommy tries to read it as a punishment. George puts him to sleep. Tommy sleeps for most of being 15. After he turns 16, he's allowed to be awake again. Sapnap babysits him. Tommy has a mental breakdown over the fact that he isn't allowed his own name. Dream chose Theo for him because of old magic. Sapnap tells him that maybe if he hates it so much, he can choose a different one. He is allowed options. That realization spirals into Tommy escaping with the book, stops at Las Nevadas for info, heals Carl/Kronos for Crocody, and gets the syndicate's location in return.